Rolling. All right, all right, all right. Today we are here. Coffee with the founder. Got my coffee here. And of course, I have another special, awesome guest, a good friend, good colleague, a sister for real, Orinthia Swindell. Orinthia, thank you for joining us. We're really doing these coffee talks to get people in our WPC network, our WPC family, familiar with the folks who've been just really a part of what we've been doing over the years. And so I'm glad you could be here and talk a little bit about who you are and the work you're all about. And so let's start by asking you, who are you actually? Introduce yourself to the folks, how you introduce yourself to people, and tell them about the work that you do.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this talk. Good morning, everybody. My name is Orinthia Swindell. I am coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. And who am I? I am an educator. I've been an educator for 27 years. I am an equity practitioner. I help to facilitate all kinds of workshops around equity, diversity, inclusion. I am a mother, I'm an auntie, I am a sister. Majority of my work has taken place in schools, and I really enjoy working with children. My work spans a gamut from like 2-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-olds, and then I've had access to adults. I really love working with the children. I think they're amazing. Their views and perceptions of the world are something that I look forward to hearing, because I know that, you know, this world is something that we're going to leave in their hands. I have worked in the classroom with very young children, talking about issues around identity, what that means, what it looks like in a school setting. I have worked with middle school children and high school children around the same topics, but of course, it had to be age-appropriate conversation. And I've also done that with adults as well. I think that the work of equity and inclusion, diversity, whatever it is that you're calling it, is necessary. I think it's important, and it's something that everyone should be engaging in.
Yeah. Now, knowing that you're the mom of 2 Black boys, brilliant, positive, awesome young men that you brought up and really shaped, I wonder, what's been the challenge for you as an educator raising Black boys in today's society around the issues that you focus on, that you know a lot about?
You know, it's always interesting. I remember having the conversation with my 2 children, and by that I mean what it means to be a Black boy and what it will mean to be a Black man in society. I remember having that conversation with them and being really honest with them, because I always felt like whatever it is that they needed to hear it from mama. I've taken that talk and that care and that love that I have for Black men and for Black boys into my work in schools. I always felt like, yes, my primary role was an educator, but I felt like there were so many different parts of my identity that I worked with and pulled from when I was dealing with or interacting with Black boys in school and in society. And I think that it's important for Black boys, for Black men to know how powerful they are, that their voice is needed to help to shape the different things that they're going to experience. And I also think that it's important for Black boys and men to realize how much Black women and Black girls need them.
Now, you mentioned a couple important things I want to ask you about. One is early introduction of this subject matter to your sons. So I want to ask you a little bit more about that. And then, of course, mentioning Black girls, Black women, I want to ask you some of your work around that as well. But let's start with the early introduction. What I want to ask you, because I feel like as Black parents, we can't wait as long as white parents to have that conversation. Okay, so I'm wondering if you can remember like the first time, the age about that you really had that honest conversation with your sons,
Mhm.
and possibly what that was like. And then what do you say to a white parent who asks that question? When should I talk to my kid about
Mhm.
that topic, these topics?
Mhm.
And how should I do that? Because I'm assuming they shouldn't have the same kind of conversation we should have.
Mhm. Mhm.
What's your
Absolutely.
thought on some of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm getting it exactly right. I think it was around the middle school years. Of course, it probably was before then. I remember talking with my children about the different treatment that they might receive, um, as it relates to their white friends or people who are not Black. Um, I remember letting them, like presenting scenarios because I'm a story person, and saying to them, like, what would you do? Right? What do you think you should do? This is what you should do, right? If you see the cops on the street, this is what you should do. I still remember when my oldest son came home and he was walking from the train station, which was it wasn't even a block away from our home. And the police had taken him, threw him upside the wall and wanted, frisked him and said, you look like so-and-so. I remember him coming upstairs to our apartment, and I remember how he felt. I remember how I felt. And I've never really been able to shake that because I know my child. He was just walking, and I also know how society sees my child. So my two boys knew very early on. They may have even shared some of my words of wisdom with their friends. And with regard to white parents and speaking to their children, I still remember when I was a part of a group at our school. It was a cross-racial group, and we were sharing our stories, and we were talking exactly about this topic that you and I are talking about right now. And there was a white person, a mother, and she listened to my story about, having the talk with my children. And I remember her crying and saying, I've never had that talk with my child, my two children. Like, there's no need for it. And it was in that moment that she and I bonded. We hugged, and we've been friends ever since then. We've been friends for years, but just thinking about the idea, you don't have to. I've never not had to think about being Black. Never, ever. I remember learning that I was Black very early on and what that meant. Um, and so, yeah, that talk probably happened around middle school. Might have happened earlier, but like I said before, they needed to hear that stuff from me. And as for white parents, I've always been honest in my approach with dealing with different people. Sometimes it might have been a little too rough, but it was honest and it was truth. And people have appreciated me for that.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. That's really insightful. And I, as a father of a very young Black boy right now, I just really have a lot of nervousness about that experience you just shared about your eldest son and how you've not been able to kind of let that go. And knowing you, like, it's hard to get you bitter forever,
Oh.
right? Like, knowing the kind of spirit and person you are, and just thinking about that is just such a great possibility for my son, and trying to prepare for that. So thank you for sharing some of that. I want to ask you about Black girls and the work you've been doing with Black girls. But first, what's your sense of how Black girls are doing in schools today, in society today? Because often, rightfully so, I think there's some attention focused on Black boys, but I don't
Yes.
know if there's enough, or there has been enough, or there needs to be more in reference to Black girls. So can you just give us a sense in your experience and your work with Black girls? What's the state of the Black girl right now in society and schools today?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I have had the pleasure of being of interacting with so many different Black girls on a daily basis, and the consensus is that they feel like they don't get enough attention. They feel like the focus is always on Black boys. They feel like they're not seen for who they are, and because of that. they have to take on this different persona so that they're not making people afraid of them. Sometimes they feel like they can't speak their truths because it may be, someone might say, oh, well, that person's just angry, or she doesn't know what she's talking about. I've always tried to create a space for Black girls where they could come in and just be themselves, to speak their truths, to connect with one another, because contrary to popular belief, Black women can get along with each other. Having Black women come together in community has been like the backbone of our existence. And I love being able to provide a space for Black girls where they can do just that, and to uplift them, to empower them, to let them know that they are beautiful and that they have so much to offer the world. So yeah, Dr. Eddie, that's the state of Black girls according to my experience with them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's helpful. I want to ask you about white teachers, white women specifically, because you know, we've done this project around the guide for white women to teach Black boys, and the advice we give to them as it relates to Black boys is different. It's specific. But I'm wondering, like, if I ask you that question about white women teachers, Black girls, what's been your sense of how that relationship is today in schools especially? And what's your advice to white women teachers who are willing to do it better and do it in a way that's understanding and embracing the kind of things you just mentioned about Black girls? What's your advice to them?
Okay, so my experience with white women teachers has been, they don't understand the Black girls. I feel like they measure them up against some kind of white woman standard that they expect Black girls to adhere to. And we can't do that because we're not white. We are who we are. And we need to be able to express that fully. My advice to white women, teachers, or in general, would be listen to Black girls and women. Let them tell their stories. Don't try to turn it into something that feels good to you, or turn it into something that you yourself might feel like you might be able to relate to, because chances are, yeah, there are some similarities, but there are some big differences. And I feel like by letting Black women, Black girls be who they are, you can learn a lot from them because they have so much to offer.
Yeah, that's helpful. I feel like as a Black man in the presence of white women, there's like this dual identity or dual experience of either really afraid or kind of this exotic kind of presence. How would you characterize as a Black woman, professional woman, experienced, intelligent, beautiful, you know, knowing what she's about, knowing what she's doing? What's it like? What's your experience like in the presence of white women day to day from your vantage point?
I feel like there have been many times where I've had to quiet myself because I don't want what I'm saying to be misinterpreted, or I don't want to be seen as that angry Black woman. And that doesn't feel good because I know who I am. I embrace who I am. And I always felt like when I was at home or within my own community, I could be that person. But then when I went to work, I could kind of sort of be her or not, depending on the day. And just imagine what that can do to a person when they don't feel like they could be themselves. Yeah, and I've also had white women try to tell me who to be, when to be, and how to be. And anybody who knows me knows that that does not work for me.
I appreciate that. Now, years ago, we came together and we developed this little Young Women of Strength as a way to kind of, you know, bring young high school students, young girls together to do some positive learning. And I was with you in the early stages, but you've been at it another 6-7 years or so solo. So what's what's been some of the highlights of that? What's been your experience with organizing and really putting together this Young Women of Strength event?
Dr. Eddie, I am so grateful that you and I were able to start that and to see how it has grown. Each year, young women will say to me, why does this just have to be one time a year? Can't we figure out a way to have it be more often? It was like they really needed that space to come together, right? And so it was for all different types of girls, or, didn't matter how they identified. I feel like that programming has really taken off. It's something that young girls look forward to each year. And we've gotten to the place where we would have young women, young girls, presenting workshops to other girls. I also added a little spiritual herbalism piece in there as well. And so I feel like that's programming that will continue to grow, and something that young girls have said to me time and time again. We need this. And I'm grateful that, there's a space for them to be able to just come together and to learn from one another. And I also look forward to their feedback so that I'll know how to, continue with programming from year to year. So it's doing a really good job, and just happy to be able to meet that need.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great. That's great. I'm happy to hear about
Yeah.
the strength, the expansion, the
Mhm.
growth and impact. And yeah, definitely looking forward to continuing to collaborate. Can you talk a little bit about COVID-19? How are you doing?
Ooh,
And you are
okay.
in New York City where, there's all kinds of stuff in the news. What's your sense of how the city, the community around you is also doing handling this situation in reference to
Right.
COVID-19?
Wow, that's a big question. There are so many things that are happening here in New York City. Within my immediate community, it feels as if people are really trying to stay inside, only going out to get the things that they need. This time of the year, I would hear children outside running and playing. I don't hear any of that. It's so quiet, especially at night, outside of the sirens that I hear, going back and forth, that it feels like I can actually hear what quiet sounds like.
Hmm.
I feel like with COVID-19 that is continuing to magnify the inequities that exist within our society, particularly as it relates to people of color. That term essential workers, like, where did that come from? I know that language evolves all the time, but they're essential now. Will they continue to be essential once we're past all of this? And then, I'm thinking about the alarming rates of the deaths of Black people and the rate of infection here, especially in New York City. And it makes me think about how that's connected to health care, access to health care, how that's connected to the economy and the types of jobs that people have access to or lack thereof. And the inequities that people face every day in society are magnified even more, because many of us know that they're there, and the question becomes like, what are we going to do, right? um, I've talked with a lot of people about what's going to happen. I mean, none of us really know, but I feel like, especially as I think about this from a spiritual space, that what's happening now is going to cause all of us, hopefully, or some of us, to rethink things, right? To be able to interact with one another and engage with the different people in our communities in a different way. We can't continue to do what we've been doing. And I feel like this moment in time is going to cause many of us, or call for many of us, to begin to think differently and to do things differently. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to be able to walk out of my home and go to a major avenue called Flatbush Avenue and not see anybody there. This time of the year, people be all over the place, buying things, talking to one another. I haven't been outside since Monday. Today is Friday, and I don't plan to go outside. Maybe next week I might. to go get something from the store. But other than that, no.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, thank you for that. It's really helpful to kind of get a sense, particularly as we see so much happening on the news, so much being said about, people in power and some of the possible elite and the privilege and how they're living. It's just hard to get a sense of everyday people and how they're dealing with it. And
Mhm.
I'm also wondering, like, when you leave your house, let's say next week sometime, what's that process like? I mean, I'm wondering, like, when you step outside, what are you thinking? What are you going through? What are you seeing around? Although it's not as populated, I remember walking the streets of Flatbush and downtown or uptown New York and seeing some folks in some real need on the
Yeah.
streets of New York City. Uh, can you give us a little insight from your view, kind of what it's like when you get ready to leave the house, and then what you're seeing, what's going on around once you leave the house?
Right. So before I leave the house, there's a whole routine that happens. There's a special coat that I wear. I have my mask here that I put on. And I always say a prayer. What I'm seeing when I walk outside, though, um, except for the densely population that's out there, I'm seeing a lot of people in need. New York City is a big city, and I mean you would see that on any given day, but I feel like it's standing out even more now because there aren't so many people outside. Um, as you're driving, there are people who you know are standing with their cups asking for money. Um, on the trains, I haven't been on the trains, but I've heard that a lot of the homeless are on the trains. In big numbers now. And it's really scary to think that there are people, and people might think that this happens anyway, but there are people who now, because they're losing their jobs, they may not have food. So like when I'm listening to the radio, I hear, people coming together to try to raise money so that people can have food because they're losing their jobs. People are afraid because they're losing their jobs that they might not be able to pay rent or pay bills. So there is a sense of fear around this. And I think more attention needs to be paid to that, particularly as it relates to the government and, the stimulus checks or the money or whatever it is that they're trying to provide for people. Because, here in New York City, they're saying May 15th is the day that maybe we'll be able to go back outside again. I have a joke with my friends: when outside opens again, we're going to do X. But who knows? Who knows if outside will open again on May 15th, because those numbers are rising.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, because it's just something always on my mind, because I've just had a chance, of course, to be there, live there, and be a part of the streets of New York, so to speak, Brooklyn specifically, and just wondering, just day to day, how everyday people, particularly those in great need, are doing, and I just can't picture anything really positive around that. And I'm not sure what to do with that, but it helps to just kind of get a sense that at least some folks are trying to rally and do
Yes.
some things around that. Now, you mentioned spiritual herbalism.
Yes.
What is that? And give me a sense of what you're doing, how that works, and what you're
Sure.
thinking about in reference to spiritual herbalism.
Okay, thank you for asking. So, about 3 years ago, I became involved in a spiritual herbalism program out of Sacred Vibes Apothecary here in Brooklyn, New York. And basically, was trained to become an herbalist. And so, the type of practice that I learned is looking at herbalism and plants and the medicine that we can draw from those plants and herbs, and looking at how that practice has been done for centuries. And we were looking at it through Afrocentric or ancestral way of doing things. So what I do now is I'm make all different kinds of medicines to help people with stress, anxiety. It runs the gamut. And what I'm doing now is I am looking into opening my own herbal business. I have friends, people from the community who reach out to me and they're like, girl, I need X, I need Y, I need Z. And I'm like, oh, let me try to get all these things together. You know, medicine and plants are all around us. I mean, we took a tour of Prospect Park and I couldn't believe that, you know, what I might consider just a plant is something that has value and that can add to the health and enrichment of us as people. So I've been focusing on that for the past 3 years, growing my practice and continuing to learn. And I'm happy that I'll be able to now share that with the different people in my family and with my community. And I also want to be able to share the gift with young people. So I'm looking into how to get that going as well.
Yeah. Well, I just got to ask you this because I come from a place where people would possibly say in response to spiritual herbalism, you ain't no doctor. You ain't go to medical school. What do you mean you got medicine? You're giving out medicine. What do you say to the skeptics, the people who may have some hesitation around spiritual herbalism? How do you respond? How do you explain in reference to a person that may be a little skeptical about that whole arena?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, as I mentioned before, this practice has been around for centuries. So before there were quote unquote doctors who went to school to get their medical degree, people were sick. People needed things that would be able to help them to get healthy, right? And access to plants, that was there, right? My oldest son, he had a cough recently, and he was describing to me how he felt. And there's an herb called elecampane that helps with the respiratory system, the lungs. And I made a tincture of it, which is medicine that you just basically, I made a tincture of it and I gave it to him and I told him how to take it. Would you believe that maybe 2 days after I gave it to him, he called me and he was like, Mom, this stuff works. I'm not coughing anymore. I gave some to my friend. When can you make some more? So I'm like, I made some more. You need to wait till May 15th. So it warms my heart when there are skeptics around me and I'm like, okay, just try this. You know, I have some pain cream that I made or a salve. And I gave it to one of my friends. She's like, girl, that stuff works. And I'm like, I know it does. Yeah. So, you know, and it also works in conjunction with traditional methods of medicine as well. So in my mind, it's not an either or, it can be an and.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you for bringing some clarity, because I know there must be some folks saying, you ain't no doctor. I appreciate that. So what's on the horizon for Dr. O? I mean, what you look at the next 10 years, some of your thoughts, some of your what you cooking, what's cooking? What are some of your plans as you look ahead?
Yes, as I look ahead, I'm going to continue to grow my herbalism practice. I am going to continue to do more consulting under my own business, because I have a business plan moving forward that will connect all of the different things that I feel like I can do and I'm really good at. And so there's a lot of traveling in there. And just trying to educate and make people aware of different things that exist in our world. And I'm always a learner. So I'm going to be learning as well as I do those things. And spending more time with the youth, because they will lead the way and help to keep me young. Yeah.
Well, I definitely look forward to continuing to partner and collaborate with you, and we've done some great stuff together as partners, co-conspirators there in New York at Friends School. I've appreciated you continuing to support me in the conference by attending and bringing students. And now, of course, having you join our nonprofit board of directors and really help guide us from a leadership standpoint to the next level. So let me ask you a little bit about that. What's it like to be on a nonprofit board? And what are some things that you think about in reference to that position, and particularly being part of the leadership as we look at the Privilege Institute in the next 25 years even?
Right. Well, I am so happy and so blessed to be a part of the leadership team. I will admit I was a little afraid at first because I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never done this before. I feel like I've always felt supported, and like there are people around me who will help out if I have a question. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I feel like the work of TPI, WPC, and all of the programming that falls underneath the TPI umbrella is something that we're working towards, and that many people need access to. And so I feel like really excited to be able to think about the next 10 years. I think you said 25. I'm like, ooh, Dr. Eddie's always going way ahead, which is good, and pushing us to think in that way. But I feel like I'm excited about the different kinds of programming that will generate and the type of environment that we'll be able to build TPI up to be. I mean, I think it's great where it is right now, but there's so much more that can be done.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to collaborating with you all around that. So a little scary at first, but starting to feel like, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've, as we mentioned, done some pretty phenomenal stuff in tandem, and I'm looking forward to, being in partnership with some of the other great folks we got on the board. And so I'm glad you're moving from participant, attendee, to presenter, to now taking some leadership on the board. And thank you again for all the support you've given me over the years, and looking forward to the years to come.
Absolutely.
Let's end in a fun way. We've been asking people, what have you been watching? Have you been watching anything that you would recommend, reading anything, listening to anything? Are there any recommendations you would add to our while you're in quarantine, check this out list?
Yes. Well, I haven't been doing very much reading, but the watching, Little Fires Everywhere. If you have not seen that, please go watch it. I've been watching a show called Ozark because I like Jason Bateman. So whatever he's in, I'm watching. Let's see. Oh my goodness, Dr. Eddie, there are so many different shows. I've been catching up on 911 with Angela Bassett. But Little Fires Everywhere, please check it out. Kerry Washington is in that. Phenomenal acting.
Yeah. Well, let me recommend this one to you because it brought back some memories of Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've checked it out yet on Netflix, but it's called Unorthodox.
Oh, no, I haven't. I will.
So check that out because, well, I'll just leave it there. Being in Brooklyn, being in New York, I think it'll be something that you'll learn some things from, but also it'll have you dealing with a little bit of emotions around assimilation, around gender identity, race. I think religion. I think there's so much stuff in that one that's one I'm recommending for folks, but particularly my friends and family in New York City. So
definitely.
Let me know what you think.
I will. Thank you for that.
Well, listen, sister, give my best to the fellas. Tell them Uncle Eddie said what's up, and tell your brother that I said hello as well, because I'm hoping he's staying safe and all that kind of stuff. But you, please take care, be safe there in New York City, and thank you for joining us on Coffee with the Founder.
You are welcome. Thank you, Dr. Eddie. Thank you for always pushing me and always believing in me. Thank you.
All right, sister, peace.
Take care.